incredible guys up here, and one of the things that we like to start out with is just, the theme of this panel is UFO disclosure, although we can get into many interesting subjects. As of late, many of you know, we've had the congressional hearings about the ideas that have been talked about by the whistleblowers and their testimony of crash retrievals, UFOs that have been recovered by governments all throughout the years, perhaps for decades, and maybe what has happened, not just with the materials and technologies, but if there may be some occupants, some kind of remains of intelligences, aliens, bodies, these types of things. Really incredible discussions happening in government. Some people think it's the real deal, some people they want to wait until we get more evidence and proof and all that. So to start things off, let's start with a simple, brief little introduction, just to chime in from each of you guys here when it comes to what we have done throughout the years with your respective fields of research and involvement, and what we've heard here recently with Congress and the government things that are happening right now with the subject. Just a few weeks ago, what can you tell us as far as what you've heard? Let's start from Noe on down. We can keep it really simple, then immediately here get to some of the questions that you guys have. What you can tell us about where your research is taking you and what we hear in Congress just recently, and what we might be able to understand. What are some of your takeaways with what we need to make sure we're keeping in mind when we hear some of the things that we heard at the congressional hearings?
Okay, some years ago, as I mentioned during my talk, my co-author John LeMay and I decided to focus on UFO cases from 1800 to 1940, which is a period of time that's been largely ignored in UFO research. And so the congressional hearings have brought forward the 1933 case that I talked about this morning, and many other very interesting, similar cases or ideas about UFO events in the past history. So a lot of people tend to think of UFOs as a very recent phenomenon, like more in the 50s and the 40s and onward. But these cases, the government has known, as David pointed out in his talk, about this topic and has been doing research into it for a really long time. And as I talked about, there was a story of aliens being kept in the sub-basement of the U.S. Capitol building, which I talked about in my presentation, in the 1930s. And then we keep hearing stories about the Aurora UFO crash in 1897 here in Texas, which is a story that won't go away. So all of this now, it seems like it's all coming to light and it's all being tied together by the new revelations.
Hello, my name is Stan Milford Jr. and I worked for the Navajo Nation tribe for a little over 30 years. I just recently retired as of May 5th on Cinco de Mayo this year. But I've learned that now that I'm retired, I'm more busy than I ever was when I was working full time. So John and I worked together in what was called special projects for about 11 years. This dealt with a lot of high-profile investigation and dignitary protection. We did SWAT work, drug and gang task force. But one of the unique things was that we did investigations of what would be termed supernatural or paranormal. So in that, there was UFO cases, Bigfoot cases, haunting cases, witchcraft and shape-shifting cases. There was a lot of different things that would be classified as paranormal or supernatural that we investigated. And so that's what you see in our presentation and in some of the television shows that we work with. We're investigating paranormal related type of phenomena. So
I'm Jonathan Dover, and we're a team. We like to say we were voluntold. We did not volunteer for anything. We just looked at each other and said, wow, we actually get to do this stuff and get paid for it. That's not bad. But we did do these investigations. One of the things that we found out over all this time is that with Native Americans, this idea of star people contact has been around for thousands of years. You know, scientists tell us that Native Americans have been here for 17,000 years. Well, when Meteor Crater impacted 50,000 years ago, Navajos have stories that this impact happened at night, and they heard the thunderclap of that impact. Hopis say that they had a settlement near there that collapsed when the thing hit. And because of that, they no longer went south to occupy that type of land because the gods had come down and destroyed that one. So that's from 50,000 years ago. That tells me that our oral history says that we've been around longer than the scientists say we have. And we've had these contacts with other people. And so it's in our culture. And that's Native American tribes all across the United States. There's only 574 of us that are recognized by the government. And there's another 500 plus up in First Nations in Canada. So we're happy to have survived, and we're still around.
Yeah, and you know, like Noe was saying, I wrote a book. One of my books is called The Mana. It's about the Manas, several of my books. So yeah, UFOs and all this mysterious stuff has been going on for thousands of years. And they, you know, there's so many stories. They're in the Bible of Ezekiel and Enoch and these things like that, UFO stories. And ancient India, you know, Hindus and Buddhists and stuff, they totally believe in extraterrestrials and UFOs. And the name in Hindi, Sanskrit, is Vimana. So every Hindu or Buddhist in Southeast Asia or India, I mean, they know what a Vimana is, and that it's an aircraft. It's ancient, you know, flight and things. So it's been going on. You know, this has all been going on for a long time, and most nations, I think, are aware of it.
Yeah, I am Mark Antonio, as you probably know. That's David Childress. Right?
Yeah, I mean.
And one of my takeaways to answer your question more specifically, is that watching those hearings, I was kind of buoyed up by it. I thought it was really good to see, because now we're seeing the U.S. government in Congress with high-level people talking about it in a way that we have never seen before in our history. Keep that in mind. It's always been a big secret, right? But now it's not. The Navy's training people, and I worked for the Navy a lot of time, the Navy's training all their personnel how to handle these strange things that occur. You heard my story about the submarine, okay? That's not the only submarine that's seen them. The Russian Navy's seen them, other navies have seen them. I talked to other submariners who said, oh, we call those jellyfish in our boats because we don't have a category for them. Jellyfish moving several hundred knots. Yeah. No. And the Navy's edict is observe and report because they don't present a threat. Okay, good. Observe and report. But you didn't know that until things like this hearing came out. And since my occurrence happened decades ago, decades ago, well before the Nimitz incident, this stuff has been going on for a long time. So to hear them talk about this in Congress is very, very prescient, I think, because now we are moving toward an era where disclosure seems to be important. Now, I have a theory on this, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, Dave. But I think that Rush, making the statements he was making, I come from an era where I had a fairly high clearance, okay, for decades. And I can tell you this, if I said anything like he's saying, and if I knew this stuff and it was real, I would not be here today. There'd be an empty seat with a microphone sitting on it and David Woodward's mark. I would have been in prison. So Grush and what he did in talking to the Congress, everything he said was stuff that was approved to say. Approved. Who believes that? I mean, we all know this is probably the case. If he was really what they call a whistleblower, all right, he would be a whistle jailer. He'd be in jail. He'd be in prison, okay? I know from experience, those are taken very seriously, all right, the clearance levels. So anyway, that said, it's that, or maybe they came to him and asked him to do it, and now he's kind of going over the edge a little bit and starting to talk to more people and say more things than I think they initially wanted him to. And guess what happened? Well, they leaked that he's been institutionalized. They leaked that he's got problems with substance abuse. Oh, well, that's how they destroy people. And they start to remove their credibility, right? You agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I do agree with that. And he, by the way, also, if you recall, he claimed that he was afraid for his life.
Yeah, he did. Thank you, David. And so I think that when you talk about this concept, you have to keep in mind that there are no whistleblowers. There are people that are making statements that I think they're told to make or they negotiate to make, because he probably wasn't going to keep quiet. So that's my take on this whole thing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shuffle, Roy Shuffle. I'm a state section director for MUFON and a field investigator. My area includes everything from Austin all the way down to here and all the way across the Rio Grande. Large territory. I am very honored to be up here with this group of gentlemen. What has come to my mind about the hearings is that it is absolute validation of the decades and decades of efforts these gentlemen, these young, good-looking, and intelligent gentlemen, have put into this business, and I think they deserve to be recognized for it. I can tell you that this week, MUFON completed its 133,000 investigations. We all have the data. We all have the information. And it's about time that our government fessed up and started to tell us the truth. And thank you all for being here.
Thanks. Did I hear somebody say they were getting paid for this? You know, getting paid? Also, nothing beats 20 minutes of listening to David Childers talk about balls. Big giant stone balls. Speaking of stone balls, the imagery you're seeing, my take is a little different on them, I think. More closer to what Mark is saying, which is that it's the government, okay? I do not trust them. I do not trust the same people that have been lying to us for 75 years about Roswell, telling us it was a weather balloon, when everybody knows it was a flying saucer. Might have been a German flying wing aircraft, but probably a flying saucer, right? They have not told us the truth about Aurora. They have not told us the truth about Magenta, Magenta, is that what it was? In Italy. They haven't told us the truth about any of these things. So, I don't understand the enthusiasm in the UFO community for the government finally patting us on the head and saying, oh, guess what? We have crash flying saucers and we have alien bodies. Did you guys watch the X-Files? Okay? We knew all this stuff. We knew this stuff. Stan Friedman was telling me that in 1978, right? And the X-Files was telling me that in 1993, 30 years ago. So I look at this and I see the people behind Grush. And I thought Graves and Fravor did a great job. They just talked about what they observed. But I think the key guy was Grush, and we're now finding some things out about him that are not very flattering and kind of make me wonder, how did this guy keep his security clearance? Oh, okay, is that bad, really? I'm just very skeptical of anything the government tells me. I think whatever they tell, I mean, look at the people that were there, like James Tapper was there, and McCullough. Those guys are deep state, PSYOP, CIA spooks. So they were sitting there essentially sponsoring this whole hearing. And it was just fascinating to me that he says, well, we have non-biologic remains that we found, or like non-human biologics. Okay, that could be a dog, right? That could be a cow, that could be a monkey. What does that even mean? And nobody asked the question, like nobody followed up with that question. Nobody asked the question I was asked. I was lucky enough to get on Fox and Friends a couple weeks ago about this, and I said, why didn't anybody ask
well, where are the alien spacecraft you recovered, right? What have we been doing with them for 30 years? We must have learned a lot because we see a lot of things in the skies, and space shuttle videos. It could be flying saucer technology, right? But we just don't know. We don't know where it came from. So I just, at this point, if the government tells me it's true, I'm not going to believe it. So I think we should want their endorsement less and be more skeptical of what they tell us, is my advice. Because I don't think what they tell us is going to be the truth. It's going to be the version of the truth, like Mark said, that they want you to hear in a given moment. And to me, that's what I'm fascinated about. I'm sitting here trying to figure out, like, okay, what are they trying to accomplish here by doing this? And you can say, oh, there's a distraction, but there's a million ways they can distract from this political event, that political event. We've been watching in the last 5 years, 6 years, all these government statements sort of endorsing UFOs and flying saucers. There's some reason, something behind it. I think we are headed towards a type of disclosure which is only going to be an acknowledgement of what we already all of us know, which is that there's aliens and they're visiting and they're doing stuff. We don't know exactly what they're doing, but I mean, I'm just kind of like waiting to see what the next development is. So that's where I'm at.
One of the things I believe that this group is all very cautious of, we do not want to repeat of the 1960s and the Condon report. So we're all very cognizant of that. I know that MUFON is providing information, but right now, in all these efforts, MUFON doesn't have a seat at the table. And unfortunately, neither do the most knowledgeable people in the business.
No. That's another thing. That's another thing. Sorry, that I should have added. I don't want to monopolize because I already talked a lot today. But why wasn't Whitney Strieber interviewed? Why wasn't Travis Walton up there? They had two of the best contact cases. Why wasn't Dr. Bob Wood, the guy who originally hired Stanton Friedman, there? Why wasn't the testimony? Why wasn't Stanton Friedman's statements entered into the congressional record? It's like, if you really wanted a serious UFO investigation, these are the people you should be talking to.
I was going to ask that.
Oh, that's right.
Guys, this has been fascinating to see where we are with things, and maybe we will get some of those things. Perhaps this could be one of many ongoing congressional hearings that allow for them to, have an opportunity to come forward. Now, before we open it up to questions for the panel, I'm going to ask a question to you guys. How many of you have heard someone talk about something about UFOs or aliens since the last year, who's had otherwise expressed no interest in any of this until they heard about it on the news, maybe the last few years? How many people have heard someone, they know someone, you yourself, or maybe family member, friends, who otherwise didn't care about any of this, but since they heard it on the news, they started to ask you questions and share about it? So yeah, quite a few people. I'm really impressed at how this generates interest. Regardless of what's happening, people are noticing that this is something that's really being discussed. I think it's really important. How many of you did not see or have not yet seen the congressional hearings? So, we don't have time to play the whole 2.5 hour some video, but we had 3 what were being called whistleblowers, David Grutch, Ryan Graves, and David Fravor come forward. Ryan Graves and David Fravor were pilots of F-18s who captured UAP, or witnessed UAP, whereas David Grutch claims to have knowledge based upon his sources of individuals involved in programs with the retrievals of these non-human biologics, non-human materials. So there's a lot of really incredible statements entered into the record that makes people wonder what's really going on. So with that being said, if you have questions about the congressional hearings, UFO disclosure, whatever that might mean to you, the ideas of what extraterrestrial life could be, we can start with questions, and if you'd like, you can just throw your hand up and I'll come to you, or we can start forming a line, whatever's most convenient. I can't probably go back without the microphone making feedback, and so let's try it if we can for anyone who's inclined to come up for the fun. We'll just start right here. All right, if you'd like to share, just keep it brief, and then we'll pass it.
Hi, my name's Nick. My question is just simple, and I guess I'm directing it to everyone. What would be the likelihood of the possibility that they have already reversed engineered something and the things that we're seeing flying around are potentially just people from this planet using this new technology.
Question?
We'll start with Love Mark. He's got the mic and go from here.
I would have handed it off to whoever wanted it. In my experience doing the work I've done, I've seen a few projects that I really feel leapfrogged in technology really quickly. And some of those projects are projects that are claimed to be canceled when you read about them now. But when a Navy cancels a project, all they're really doing is renaming it and a new budget is paying for it. So that project technically canceled, but it's not really canceled. And I experienced that. I worked on such a project where we had a device that would leave a submarine to go to the surface, take off from the water, fly around, like the flying sub from Voice of Common Sea, who remembers? Right? The FS-1, flying sub 1, remember that? And it landed back on the surface after doing its mission, closed its wings, sunk, and put itself back into the missile tube of the sub and went home. That technology was really extraordinary. And I was responsible for making engineering models of that. And it was called Project Cormorant. You can look it up online. It's not classified anymore. And it's now something they claim is canceled. It's not canceled. Okay, it's been renamed and budgeted under a new program office. So that makes it a new project, and thus the old one is gone. So that's an example of what I saw of something that was very possibly re-engineered from, or back engineered from something previously. As an example. Who else?
I'd like to maybe have David chime in. Now, a lot of the things we consider, that maybe aren't UFOs by the way of alien technology, we could consider that maybe there's some previous Earth-based civilizations that have some kind of technology that we may see now that we interpret in some ways. What can you say maybe that we see in the ancient record that shows us that there perhaps were flying eagles, and maybe there could still be now, but they're not us by typical means, but someone here, but not outside of our world.
Okay, well, yeah, you're almost describing the story of Mount Shasta. If you're familiar with the legends and myths around Mount Shasta in Northern California, it's an extinct volcano. It's in Northern California, but it has all of these legends about it being flying saucer base of Atlanteans and Lemurians living inside of Mount Shasta. Again, Vimanas. So, yeah, here we have, UFOs that are ancient. This is what you're talking about. And if you've ever been around Mount Shasta in California, I mean, when you were there in that area, everybody knows these stories, and even the police. I mean, they all know about the UFOs and stuff in Mount Shasta, the Atlanteans and Lemurians there. But yeah, all this goes back to Vimanas. But also, to Nikola Tesla. I mean, that's the thing with flying saucers and these aircraft. They're not jets. They're not rockets. They're electric. And that's what Tesla was trying to do. So it really goes back even, as far as I think the military and stuff, back to before World War II and all that. And with this, I think Mark would probably agree with me that, oil, after World War II particularly, oil companies essentially controlled the world. And what industrialized countries do is make weapons and resell them. And then the third world countries sell oil and they buy weapons with it. And yeah, so that's, that's the control mechanism we've been under for the last 50 years. But we're getting out of that now, I believe. And with Tesla cars and electric cars and all this stuff, it's all starting to come out.
Going to the next question, so I'm going to give it to you here. And by the way, if you have a particular guest you'd like to direct the question for, feel free to say that or the whole panel as well.
It's for the whole panel. Do you think the Congress being so open is in direct correlation with the new images we're getting from like the James Webb and the space programs we've seen? Like the new images that we've never seen before, like they probably have access to those things before we do. Maybe they've seen something and now they're like, okay, maybe it's time to start slowly letting them know what's going on.
Well, for the government, we as Native Americans have a very unique view. We do not trust the government at all. Because they tried to exterminate us, and we survived. So, as such, and just so you know, there were over 6,000 treaties made with Indian tribes since 1492. Not one of them was ever kept. That's a good record, isn't it? So, but we have military people show up at our deals because they want to find out, how do you change? How do you shapeshift into an animal? Because wouldn't that be cool to weaponize that and have soldiers that could shapeshift into animals and go behind enemy lines and wreak havoc? They want to know about dimensional gates. They want to know about wormholes. They want to know about faster than light travel. So, you know, a lot of what they're looking at, things that, you know, the Hopis can fly in baskets and boards. They miniaturize themselves. I've had people tell me that they've seen flying boards with little Hopis in them. And, you know, when you're talking to an elderly person that's telling you something that happened to them, and they're embarrassed about it because people are going to think they're crazy. And they tell you, yeah, there's a flying board that landed right in front of my house. You know, that tells you that there's some weird stuff going on all over the place. So, you know, the military would love to know about this stuff, but they'd love to weaponize it. And because we are a violent people. And I think there's a big sign out there in space that says, you can look, but you can't have any contact. Because these people are too dumb and they're too violent.
I think one of the biggest factors that has happened in recent times is this right here. In this audience, probably very few people that don't have one of these on their person. We can pick this up, we can communicate information. I can talk to somebody in Scotland right now if I wanted to. We can share information, our experiences related to UFOs, other paranormal phenomena in real time. And the government can't control that. Whether it's on TikTok or Facebook, you know, these social media platforms, people are able to share that information, and our governments, the superpowers, can't control that. People are able to share communication freely now, and they can't. Back in the day of the Roswell incident, they can't come in, storm into your house and point a gun at you and your family and threaten you that we're going to take everybody's life if anybody says anything. It's this right here is one of the biggest factors, I think, in recent times that is allowing this change and awakening that we're seeing today. You look at how many people came out for this particular event in the past 2 days, and we've seen that. Contact in the Desert, Roswell, more and more people are coming to these events, including their families. They're bringing their children out. Children are learning now. They're hearing these things, they're reading about these things, and the parents are letting the children learn about these things so they can, as they grow up through their teen years, through high school and in college, they're forming their own ideas of what this stuff is. And that's what me and John want. We present what we have done in these investigations. We're not trying to sell an idea or belief. We're just trying, we hope that each one of you will take that information, go back, research, learn, read. This gentleman right here has read so much, and that's why he has so much information related to a lot of these phenomena and stuff. And that's what each one of us need to do, is educate ourselves and be able to formulate our own ideas.
Get the next question.
Sure. And I'll just say that there's so much more technology than ever. There's so many more amateur astronomers than ever. So, and more connections. that we can share things openly. So I think it's a good point, it's a good question to be able to ask, what can we learn? So it's important to pay attention to the synchronous events taking place, and maybe how we can see what's going to take place even later this year as well. So we'll go to the next question. So let's go.
This is for the panel. I just wanted to say thank you for all your work and for all that you've done to even tell us about what's out there. Because when I was a little girl, I got kicked out of Bible school because I asked too many questions. And all my life, I'm just so proud that I've seen you and your fellow authors out there telling us what is really out there and what the government is hiding from us. And I want to thank you very much, all of y'all.
And Mark responded up there.
To your last question, I didn't get a chance to answer. We don't know what the James Webb Telescope is being pointed at, okay? But we know where the thing that they released that we've seen is very interesting. We're seeing farther back to the beginning of the universe. And guess what we found out? We found out that the universe might actually be a lot older than we think. So we think 13.8 billion years. That's the number we all believe. Except there's fully formed galaxies only 200,000 or 300,000 years after the beginning of the universe that we see. So how can that be? It takes a long time, millions of years, for galaxies to form. So how can we see them? So our physics is in flux, just so you know. We don't have all the answers. And by the way, whoever asked that, you asked that question about being kicked out of private school. When I was in 3rd grade, I was sent down to kindergarten for 6 months.
Bible
No
school.
lie.
I was kicked out of private school.
Yeah, private school. See, I was in kindergarten for 6 months, and when my parents found out, that teacher got fired because I was too precocious, asking too many questions. See what happens when we ask questions?
All right, next question here.
Thank you all for the presentations. 2 things. One is Mr. Grush mentioned the skiff situation where he's, and particularly in regards, that I recall, that he had a list of the corporations that were acquired, that were receiving monies, where they got the material, the biological material, and that he would offer that information to these congressional folks. And so I wanted to bring that up. So there's hope as far as, there's furtherance. And the other thing is what you all would think about the moon and its mass and the likelihood that the Earth, with its gravitational pull, could actually keep the moon in its orbit, considering its size relative to its mass. There's follow-up, but that's the question.
That's the moon one. You want to talk about the skiff one?
Yeah.
Okay, I need it. Let me. I've actually never been in a skiff. It's a classified room where you can't take any materials out of that material that you read. It's all classified stuff in there. I've never been in a skiff. I've been in classified meetings, but not in a skiff. To answer your question about the moon, and you'll get a chance to talk about that, but I'm sorry. Hey, come on. The Earth's gravity is actually based on the formation of the moon, how it formed. The moon's actually spiraling away about 3 centimeters per year. And there will be a time in the future where if the sun wasn't going to die, the moon would eventually be free of the gravitational pull of the Earth and will be free to move throughout the solar system in the new orbit that it might make for itself on the planet. Okay? But the sun will die long before that happens. It's going to take more billions of years for that to happen than the moon, or the sun has left. Right? So to answer that question, so the Earth's gravity is strong enough. The reason it's spiraling away is because the Earth's day is actually slowing down. Right? It used to be 4 hours per day. The Earth would go around once. But then with the formation of the moon and the bulge of the ocean, that tidal bulge being pulled up by the moon and the sun is like a friction acting on the Earth, slowing it down. And the moon is being tugged forward with that bulge. And that's giving it a little bit more momentum each year. They're a little further away as the Earth is now being robbed of some of its rotational speed and slowing down. So the Earth's day is going to be longer in the future. It might be 32 hours someday, and the moon will be that much further away. See? So everything's in flux, everything's changing in the universe, and we cannot guarantee that any one situation is going to stay the way it is. And that's actually how it works in politics, too, isn't it? Yeah. No.
First of all, what's a centimeter in a measurement that actually means something? What is the metric system? All right, the skiff question is really important because here's the thing. I think again, we're not seeing the forest for the trees on these hearings. When he says, well, to tell you where the alien spacecraft are, and to tell you where the bodies are, and to tell you who's got them, and how much money's being spent, I have to go to a SCIF. A SCIF is a secure compartmentalized information facility. I believe that's correct, right? Secure compartmentalized information facility, meaning it's like a Faraday cage, nothing gets in, nothing gets out. The simple fact that you have to go into a SCIF to talk about aliens means there's aliens. That means that there are aliens, right? So what they're doing is, this is theater. This is theater. They are telling you right there with that admission, the fact that this is classified means that there are aliens, because why would it be classified otherwise? If there are no aliens, then none of the information about them will be classified, and none of the information about where this material is will be classified. There's no reason for it whatsoever. That was my point.
Interesting political theater is an interesting concept. Next question.
Okay, so after watching the congressional hearing, I got a sense of hostility from these interactions that they've had. I have people hitting me up all the time that used to call me crazy, now actually asking me, I thought you said they were nice and you said that they were good. And I have a daughter that would come to these events with me every year, and now she didn't because she thinks, because of Project Bluebeam, that these might be demons. So how us who know better, my intuition tells me that if they wanted to hurt us, they would have done it a long time ago. How can we do our due diligence to stop this fear-mongering media that's going on, and how can we kind of mitigate to more positive outlook?
Great question. Who do we want to have start off?
I'll just say this real quick and I'll pass it down. If I catch a great alien, I'm going to wring its neck. Okay, and I'll tell you why. I didn't tell you during the talk, but my youngest son was starting to sleep in our bed and wouldn't get out for 6 months. And when I finally asked him why, he finally came forward through tears and said, I'm afraid the aliens are going to take me through my window again. Again, was the word that got me. Okay? Now, up to that point, I had not been doing, he was 9 at the time, he's 25 now, by the way. Okay, when he was 9, he said this, and I had not been doing the MUFON chief photo video analyst thing, and I was just doing it privately as an astronomy guy. Well, that makes your blood run cold. So, whether they're demons or not, I mean, we can call them all the names you want, but I think that they're heartless in some ways. I think they're biological robots, all right, that are actually here because we make robots in our image. Why won't aliens make robots in there? And we thought of it, so why wouldn't they? It's possible. So maybe those are robots here just doing a job. You know, not caring about this, that, the other, or what we are, what we think. Maybe they don't even read our minds, maybe they do. But the thing is, I don't think that they're demonic things. I just think that they're creatures that are here who are treating us the same way we treat ants, you know? And they tag us like we tag elk in the Yukon. They'll tranquilize an elk, they'll put a radio collar around its neck. We recognize a radio collar, right? You're not gonna wake up after being knocked out, oh, they have a big radio collar, not see it. So that's why they'll shove something up our nose or do some kind of implants, like you had an implant. I remember Brother James, right, and I had one, I think, and other people had them. Well, maybe that's how they do it with a creative and intelligent species, so that that species does not know what they're doing. And they're gathering scientific data perhaps. So that's my take on it.
I think it's critical that what Mark said about biological robots. I know the vast majority of y'all in this room have seen the movie War of the Worlds, right? Can I have a show of hands?
Yeah.
Okay? Now, for the millennials, you saw the recent one with Keanu Reeves, right? The day that ever stood still, thank you. I'm very nervous up here. I didn't expect to be up here with this quality of group, so forgive me. So the day the earth stood still, but you go back, do you realize what that movie really was? They changed the movie. The robot, Gordon, was the biological entity. He was the master. Klaatu was the slave. So what Mark mentioned has been already thought about and spoken about. They changed the movie because they didn't want to terrify us. Thank you.
I did not know that.
Klaatu Niktu. Klaatu Bravo Niktu.
Thank you, John.
You know, the whole idea of aliens, and we tend to put our morality on other things. And we like to say, because we grew up in a religious dogma, being taught to us at an early age, and being told to go to church. And in some cases, you were whipped if you didn't go to church, you know, because you were not going to go to hell. So we've grown up with this. It's been a part of the culture. Would you believe that Native Americans are the only people in the United States, in order to be a Christian, we have to give up our culture? That's frightening. So, and this is part of boarding school, you know, taking away your identity. So, when we look at aliens or other beings, sky people, what we see is negative energy and positive energy. In Navajo, they call that Hosho. And what it means is a balance. It recognizes that there's good. It recognizes that there's evil. And it says you have a personal responsibility as a human to choose which side and keep it in balance. So, you know, in Christianity, they say we must destroy evil so we can be good. You know, again, we're warlike, so we're going to destroy things. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the way it should work, because there is bad here. You know, and we can flip-flop back and forth at a moment's notice. In law enforcement, we have a saying, treat everybody with the utmost respect and kindness, and have a way to take them out if you need to. I get people that start scooting away from me when I say that. So, you know, in answer to the question, you know, be careful about putting our moral values on things that might be more insect and carrying out a program and doing things that is necessary. And with the implants, I kind of think that they're human licenses. You know, we're actually pets. And they have to put a chip in us to claim us later on if we wander off and disappear. So, as long as they don't show up with a book that says how to serve man.
I think one of the things to consider is that when Europeans and individuals from Spain were coming to the North American continent, they were coming here for a lot of different reasons. They were coming here for religious purposes. They were coming here to find gold. They were coming here in different types of craft. And a similar thing is happening for visitors to this planet. They're coming from a lot of different places in our universe, either through what's termed as wormholes or dimensions. But I don't think, there's some people, John and I, that we were friends with that have the opinion, oh, they're here to love us and care for us and look out for us, and maybe some of them are. But I do believe there's also, on the flip side of that, I think there's some that we would have to be very cautious about. And so, anyway.
In all the years I've spent looking at eyewitness testimony of encounters with extraterrestrials, my opinion closely aligned with what Mark was saying, that these appear to be drone-like, remote-controlled, not robotic in the sense that they are robots the way we think of them. They appear to have biological material, perhaps they're clones, but we would call them, from our morally and biased judgments, we would call them soulless, or, they have been programmed to carry out a task. We did a book called Aliens in the Forest a few years ago, my good friend Ruben Uriarte and myself, where a hunter in a forest in Northern California encountered beings. And he actually went up in a tree, scrambled up a pine tree to escape because he felt threatened as these beings congregated at the base of the tree. And he observed very strange behavior during the many hours that he was up in the tree. He was looking down at them, and he noticed things which I found very interesting. In interviewing him, he told us that the creatures would be going about apparently collecting samples from the vegetation all around the base of the tree. And suddenly, all of them would stop what they were doing at the exact same time. They would sit motionless for a few seconds, and then they would refocus and start another task somewhere else. Or they would gather around the base of the tree and make yet another attempt to get Mr. Schrum down out of the tree. And then when they were unsuccessful, because he was shooting it, he had a bow and arrow, he was bow and arrow hunting. He was shooting arrows down at them and throwing some of the stuff he was carrying down at them. So they would stop trying to get him out of the tree, and they would go back to collecting vegetation. Very strange behavior. But he told us in the interviews we did with him that it appeared to him that these beings were being remotely controlled. So, as Mark was saying, we have these entities are probably sent to our planet by beings who do not come themselves. They are the controllers. They are the ones who are pulling the strings. They have come here to collect data, to collect specimens, to whatever their agenda is, we're not clear on, but we can only see the superficial actions that they take. But I have always firmly believed that these are not sentient beings in and of themselves. They are being controlled by others who are the masters of this agenda that's happening on our planet.
Cisco Grove, right?
Cisco Grove, yes.
So it could be dealing with a lot of anthropological, ethical, or even cultural implications that we have to be considerate of when we're dealing with the experiences that we hear. Just the main way we find out about these things is through direct feedback.
Right. And I think it's true that we don't attribute good or bad to them. These creatures, they have no moral judgment. They have no, what we would call soul. They are here, they're programmed like a machine. They're doing what they're doing, and they're being constantly receiving updates to their programming based on their interactions. So that's my opinion, based on what witnesses have told us.
Great. All right, next question.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to everybody. It's been great. My head is blown out. And I love Mike Barra. He's so feisty. I love him. So, my question, I was watching the hearing. I saw the David Frater, the guy from the Tic Tac incident. He did mention that when he saw what he saw, the thing, whatever, moved so fast. So they asked him, did you feel threatened at some point? He said he didn't feel threatened at that point, but then he said that if that thing would engage him, we didn't have no time to react because he was going so fast. So my question is, if these entities are so advanced, even more advanced, like he said it, is more advanced than our technology, I mean, why would they come here? I guess like you said, maybe they're just here to study us, and then maybe to see what they can learn from us, just like we're trying to learn from them, maybe? Anybody can ask.
Why would aliens come to live?
Let them move real fast. They don't really do anything.
I think your observation is quite right, that, and the question you pose is a good one. Why are they here at all? And I talked about it in my talk. I mentioned how we're carbon-based, and I'm a carbon bigot, okay? And so I think that most likely the universe is going to be carbon-based. If that's the case, it needs oxygen. Well, our planet is a bright blue beacon blazing away in the universe of oxygen, visible from thousands of light years away. So we've been blasting that out there for 2 billion years. That being the case, I think that is why they're here, because every creature on this planet also is imbued with another characteristic that's indelible, and that's curiosity. So if every creature on our planet has an indelible curiosity sort of programmed in because of the way DNA works or however it works, isn't it possible that that's a template that the universe provides and that maybe other planets have life that's also curious and also seeks to know what's out there? It's a possibility that maybe this is something that's built in to all life in the universe, so that ultimately life is going to find us, you know. So if that's the case, I think that in all likelihood, you know, these creatures that are here because they're looking for other creatures and worlds like their own. And their own, if they're carbon-based, is also going to be an oxygen atmosphere blazing away in the universe as well. We just haven't found it yet.
This is something I feel strongly about. I don't really have an opinion unless it's a strong opinion. So they are not here for anything except us. Okay? Which is kind of what Mark just said. Everything that's on this planet is in abundance in the universe. Water, oil, gold, oxygen, air, anything you want you can get somewhere else. So why are they here? And the answer is because they're weaker than us. Because they need something from us. We don't need them. We are on their planet, abducting their cows and taking their DNA and trying to make something better out of themselves. They're here doing that to us. So when you get into this question, it almost becomes a spiritual issue. What do we have that they might want that maybe they don't have? And Noe mentioned it. We have souls. We do. It's an electromagnetic energy. It goes beyond this world into the next world, whatever that is. Call it heaven, call it whatever.
But if their technology is bigger than ours.
Speakers are, okay. So Whitley says this too. And so this idea, there's this narrative being pushed, and I think the hearings are part of this. Oh, they're superior to us. Well, why are they superior? Well, because they have this technology. Well, I'm pretty convinced, to answer the other guy's question, that we have that technology. I think we've had flying saucer. I think we've had anti-gravity since 1958, and I think we have basically flying saucer technology probably since the 1970s. So a lot of what we think are alien spacecraft are actually some of our secret programs. That's what I think. So I don't think, it's kind of like, you know, when you learn to drive, right? When you're 15 and you don't have your license yet, all these people that have been driving for years are way ahead of you. But once I have a year's experience, none of these guys are better drivers than I am. It's the same thing with the technology. Now that we've figured out their technology, which I think we've done in secret, they're not superior to us. And so the narrative is they're superior to us and they might be hostile. So guess what does that translate into? Well, higher taxes and more control over your life, right? But the reality is, that's always the answer for everything, right? But the reality is, they're not stronger than us, they're weaker than us, or they wouldn't be here trying to take something from us. We're not on their planet doing things to them, unspeakable things to them in the middle of the night because we need something from them. So I think we need to shift our attitude about this whole interaction. I think that's the only way it's going to successfully resolve itself. Is when we realize that they need something from us more than we need something from them. And, you know, we should negotiate from that stance when the time comes. And I encourage people, there are experiencers probably in this room, people that have had direct experiences. Stand in your strength and don't give them anything, that you don't want to give them, and don't accept any help that you didn't ask for, right? That's my position.
Next question.
Yes, my name is James. I guess it's going to be a little bit more contradictory and controversial, but I was wondering what y'all's opinion on Dr. Stephen Greer, his documentaries on knowledge and the lost century and how to reclaim it. He kind of goes against kind of what y'all are saying, that they're very benign, they're here to help us, that they, I mean, we've had documented cases thousands of years, but they weren't showing them gutting cows and such, they were showing them helping us. They've been wanting to help us, they want to help us. I mean, there's an island off the coast of, I think, Italy or somewhere in France, where it's completely uninhabited by modern humans. It's just the natives living there. We don't go there because they're their own ecosystem, they're surviving on their own. It's kind of same thing with us, where they want to leave us alone, but they want to help us. When you send off into space, they deactivate with lasers. There's cases and reports of that. They don't want us to decimate ourselves, they want to help us, and he talks about different levels of technology that we already have, that we've had since the 30s, like the Nazi flying bell, that we already captured this kind of stuff, we reverse engineer it, we've had it forever, and the government agencies are actually doing this kind of stuff, or the shadow government that he talks about, that's separate from our actual federal government, more black op kind of stuff. He says that these kind of governments are the ones that are kind of instilling this fear because they want us to be afraid of aliens, because they need to be able to create a divisive population. So I guess I'm saying that Dr. Greer states that these kind of aliens that are coming out and harming us and abducting are not really like true aliens, but they're federal government technology. And I've seen it, and I was in the Marines, my brother's in the Marines, and I have a friend that was in the Marines. I've seen stuff on deployment, my brother's seen stuff near a military base in 29 Palms, California, and my buddy went to the Delaware Proving Grounds, and he saw stuff out there. He says they weren't allowed to go at night, and that's in the documentary, it's about knowledge from Dr. Greer, and he said that they weren't allowed to go at night. They were humming all the time, and he even said that one of the guys was telling him that they had tunnels under there that were cut out with lasers with this technology, and he said that it's a really hot spot for that kind of stuff. And I guess my question is what y'all think about Dr. Stephen Greer, what he's doing with the Disclosure Project, and his, I guess, narrative is that these aliens are benign, they want to help us, especially with the level of technology. And he quotes Nikola Tesla, and he states that the quantum entanglement, he calls it quantum vacuum. He says that we're able to pull this kind of stuff from anywhere. Essentially, this is what's able to power a lot of these crafts. And he said the amount of space that's in a coffee cup would be enough power to evacuate all the world's oceans. So I guess Dr. Stephen Greer, my question, what you guys think of him and what his Disclosure Project is bringing forward.
My first thought is no more coffee for you.
Thanks, Jay, for your service. Appreciate that. Let's hear what our and hope you report your sightings, by the way. Report your sightings. Impressions on Greer's material.
I'm impressed with how you got that all out in like 1 minute 47 seconds. I don't have an opinion of Greer that much. I have other opinions of him based on having observed him over the years. And I'll leave those for private conversations because I don't want to come out and say what I think. I do have a problem, let's be clear. Okay? But that's it. I'm not going to say any more. Mike might have something to say.
Everybody that does this started out with sincere intentions. That's all everybody started out with sincere intentions. Things happen along the way. Sometimes you want attention, sometimes you want money. I don't know. Things happen along the way. I think his early work especially stands. I mean, he pulled together that first congressional hearing, which I think was a really big deal. Got to give him credit for that. He's been big on the Atacama alien, which I think is significant. But there's nobody here, as much as I love every single one of them, or in the entire community, that I agree with 100%. So, I just say let's appreciate his contributions, and his opinions are his, just like mine are mine, and Mark's are Mark's. Where's your opinion?
Anybody else want to comment?
Next question, please.
Regis held his 20th anniversary of the Disclosure Project, Dateline 2.0. You can go watch it on his channel if you're interested, or his other documentaries as well. Next question.
How's it going? So you actually have to write it down because I don't want to forget anything. I like to pick minds, right? So this will be an interesting one. How do y'all feel about quantum physics being shown through technology because we've lost the truth on how to use the mind? So what better way to show the people next level advancement if it isn't through reverse AI engineering through the artifacts we see? And the government saying it's disclosing more is just to keep us distracted, but there's most likely technology that isn't being shown to us. And how long do y'all feel that there will be an open contact? Because at this point, it would feel like it's already here, because if you connect the dots right, I feel like they're using quantum physics to reverse it and show it through AI, which I'm leaning more on the lines of it being robotic, quote unquote, because I mean, it just makes sense, you know? If they say it's already here, where else it can be if it isn't in your hand, you know what I'm saying?
By using quantum physics and maybe what we're seeing in technology and encounters, what do you guys think?
Thank you for that question. Again, I don't want to hog the mic, you know, I'm sure everybody's have plenty to say, but we know that the government has projects they're working on that we don't see, and I'm clear. And as far as the specific use of quantum physics, quantum physics changes a lot. You know, we saw me talk about fundamental forces. That's changed. Since I first started doing that talk, some of those tenets have changed a little bit. Not enough to make a big difference, but it's changing. So as far as the reverse engineering of stuff like that, I think that's happened. I'm sure Mike thinks that's happened. Okay, clearly. And you might even think that's happened. You know, everybody thinks it's happened. Let's be clear, you probably all do. Yeah, there's stuff, you know, I worked on projects that were actually looked like UFOs to people, or reported as UFOs, over our technology. I know that for a fact, okay? And when I contacted the program office in DC, I said, this is gonna blow up. And they said, let them think it's a UFO, it's fine. No, you don't get it. One photographer is gonna get 10 more, and then 20 more, and finally we'll get a picture of this thing that's flying around that you don't want them to see. And then there was a silence, you can hear crickets chirping. And then they said, we'll send you a statement. And when I put the statement out, everybody went home. It's one of ours, guys, it's not a real UFO. And they all went home, right? So they sometimes use it as a smoke screen, you know, and that's also a problem that we have.
I think what the audience needs to take to their heart is how much our knowledge base has grown over the last 40 years. It's been phenomenal. Back in the day, and I'll say this with this group up here, in the previous century, when I was in school, we had 103 elements to study in chemistry. Okay? And it wasn't alchemy. I see some of the younger people going, oh yeah, sure, no, 103. And that was back in the 60s and 70s. Our knowledge has grown greatly. Some of the physics that I dealt with then really looks quite archaic and ancient at this point. We're so deep into the subatomic particles, dark matter, dark energy for another. So our knowledge increases daily. Do we know everything? No. I think Mark said it best. But we sure are searching. But you gotta understand, we are down to really, really tiny stone balls.
And now the actual number in an atomic nucleus, as we understand it now, the highest number is 118. Okay, that's what it is now. And if it goes any higher than that, then that strong nuclear force I talked about can no longer hold the nucleus together, and they won't stick around for long. So they might momentarily be element 122, and then it goes back to 116, 17, 18, whatever. So that's the kind of thing that's happening. But as our physics improves, our detection capability might also improve. But yeah, you know, it's all fun stuff. What can I say?
I think it was Arthur C. Clarke who said any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. So maybe we will learn a lot of new ideas and scientific models because of these interactions. Next question.
Hey, my name is Tony. I'd like to thank you guys, each and every one of you, first of all, for
all the knowledge and information you guys have shared with us, freely. I truly believe that real knowledge for the betterment of civilization should not be taxed. It should be shared freely for the betterment of civilization. But my question is for Mark. You spoke about propulsion. So that's one area that I truly believe could open the window as to what's really going on, what the government has, and what they've been doing with it. So I've been following the TR-3B Manta. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's supposedly it's an aircraft that works with a mercury ferrofluid vortex engine. Would that have the ability to produce the KK graviton properties that you were discussing?
I don't know. I don't know, actually. That's a great question. But keep in mind that these things are likely particle accelerators to generate those things. And that could take them to that realm I was telling you where the universe is a lot smaller when you get in and you get punched back in. And don't forget, the way these things would operate in this mechanism is they don't have propulsion per se. They don't have propulsion on board at all. All they have is the capability to generate more or less particles and have a targeting wave to come back into a certain entry point. So in other words, they go from here to here to here, discrete pops, discrete spots, right? Now to you, with your eye, it looks like it's going zzz across the sky. But to them, they're actually going ding, 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 ding. And they're making their way across. They're not really here, they're not really there. They oscillate back and forth. That's how an object under the water can move hundreds of knots, as we've seen, and not be affected by the pressure or the water itself, because it's not really there and then it is there. We're not used to this world. We're not used to this interdimensional travel thing. We're only used to going down the road in our cars and feeling the wind blowing our car around. We're not used to being able to stop at one stoplight, vanish, and reappear at the next stoplight. We're not used to that. But this is the new physics that's coming out. Isn't this exciting? It's happening, and it's going to be happening. And with Lawrence Livermore's advancements and the investigations of these particles at CERN, we're going to see a marriage of those two technologies, the fusion reactor possibilities by Lawrence Livermore and the KK particle studies at CERN. And I imagine we're going to hear stories about them overlapping and doing some really cool joint projects in the future.
Exciting. And just because Mark brought up the superconductors, for those of you who don't know, we were scheduled to have a superconductor here in Texas, up in Waxahachie, and that all got canceled and literally buried. They were beginning work what would have been the hyperloop of the superconductor in Waxahachie, Texas, and that became like what's in Geneva, Switzerland, the CERN. We wouldn't have that here in Texas, and some people consider that maybe there's something still going on, but they officially said that all got canceled and they buried it, literally. And there's still an enormous structure underground that's just literally been covered back up. That they just decided we're done, we're not going to continue this. Other interests, perhaps. David, are you ready to chat? You're right. All right, next question.
My name is Brother James. I go by Brother James. I'm going to direct this question to Mark. This has divided the country pretty bad. Do you think global warming is real, or is somebody controlling it?
Well, first of all, Earth changes all the time. Okay. I know we went through the whole global warming thing, and yes, there were changes to our environment. The trouble is that when politics got involved, unfortunately, global warming became a buzzword. Carbon footprint became a money-making scheme, okay? And the next thing that happened was that the subtle change in the media, global warming, global warming, global warming, Al Gore, global warming, global warming, okay, became climate change, climate change, climate change. Remember that? All of a sudden, global warming vanished in the media, and it became climate change. Two words, very different, right? Climate change. Well, climate change is something, as an astronomer, I can tell you, we've had happen all the time. I have a list, and actually a statement showing the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere over the last 10 million years. Do you know it was a lot higher at one point, and it was a little lower at one point? Do you know it goes like this? And guess what? That's before we were around. So these levels fluctuate. So if we see a level that's going up slightly, then of course the politicians and the money-making people say, we've got to do something to make money on this. I mean, did they say that out loud? We got to do something to stop this rise in carbon dioxide. So they're just chasing things. Now they don't know whether the rise in temperature is due to the rise in carbon dioxide, or if the rise in carbon dioxide, or if it's the other way around. Okay, so they still don't know that. Wait a minute. The science is not in, as they say. The science was never done right. I came up with a climate gate paper, which I actually put out there. And it basically talks about how in China, there were these recording stations, weather stations, that were recording temperature when they were going through the whole global warming is in, and science is done. And there were 14 stations in China that were recording higher temperatures on an upward trend. Uh-oh, that sounds bad. Except what they didn't account for was the urban sprawl. They used to be isolated stations. Now they're surrounded by buildings, and in some cases, literally in the outflow path of air conditioning units, where the warm air, the warm winter is hitting them, raising the temperature, altering the data. The Greenland ice cap, it's melting, it's melting. Actually, it wasn't. It was thickening. Wait a minute, now temperature from space shows that Greenland's farther away from the satellite, meaning that the ice is melting. No, the ice is building up, and Greenland is sinking into the tectonic plate. Okay, you see that? So that is actual fact versus the height that you see. And the snows of Kilimanjaro, they vanished. Remember that? Oh no, the snows of Kilimanjaro. We sing about it in a song, and they're gone now. And they were for a period of time. Why? Because people there deforested the slopes, and the warm valley air managed to go over the top and melt the snow. Fact. So, you can go on and on. There's like 20 other things, okay, that I won't go into. But the fact is, that report that was commissioned by the UN was full of a lot of false data. And unfortunately, as a science guy, I can tell you that it makes me bristle when I see bad scientific experiment. It really does. At least do it right. I'll believe it as long as the data was collected properly. I never had a problem with that. That was a great question.
I'd like to completely back up what Mark said. I spent the first third of my career in research and development, some of it with DARPA. And in that regard, you have to be careful of the data. And some of the data we have here in the States, we stopped, quote, warming in about 2009. We were using 1,100 temperature stations. And what we did in 2010 as a government organization, we moved those reading devices closer to the city. And our heating went up again, our temperature went up again. Yeah, we were shocked, The urban heat island effect is true. I've got a variety of papers out, published papers, not paid for, so help yourself. And if you're an insomniac, they will cure you. But with that, you'll be able to do a better job in your home. And global warming, as the government stated it, does not exist, has not been proven. And every time, as Mark said, they mess with the data, they move the measuring instruments, and that destroys all their credibility.
The last thing I forgot to mention, on those Kilimanjaro things, okay, the temperature at the summit of Kilimanjaro actually dropped 10 degrees over the last 10, 15 years. Dropped. Yet the snows went away because of the deforestation. So the average temperature at the top was actually lower. Okay, so you can see that this process is being fudged with, and there really does have to be much tighter control and much more proper scientific controls. That word is very important. Controls put into this experimental phase of trying to figure out what's really going on with our planet. We live a very short time. The planet's trends are very long. So you have to look at the long-term trends to kind of understand what's going on. And so there's an application out there for the iPad. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it's called Earth something or other. I'm sorry, I can't remember. And it actually shows all the data for millions of, all the way back to the Haitian era, up in the very beginning of Europe. And you can actually look at temperature trends and how everything changed, the amount of oxygen, how that changed over the years. It's really quite complete, done by this really good university. And so I think that can serve as an interesting conversation builder when people talk to you about climate changing or global warming. And there are places that got hotter, but there's also a lot of places that got colder, all right, complementarily. And that's the thing we have to keep in mind here. It's not global, you know. And incidentally, the plankton in the ocean, all right, that make 89% of our oxygen by some estimates, okay, they're still going in force, okay. The BP oil spill did not kill the Gulf, it was going to. But I talked to a CEO in Houston of an oil company that was in charge of capping that well that blew out, for instance, and that methane bloom that was coming out. I knew, as a science guy, I knew that the methane blooms create opportunities for other creatures. And that methane bloom in the Gulf spawned methane-eating bacteria, as I said. And those methane-eating bacteria ate all the methane within a few weeks. And the Gulf that was being stated that it was going to be dead for decades, if not millennia, basically showed no real effect. And the reason was because these bacteria have long since evolved to take care of problems like that. They rise, they fall, and they're targeted opportunists. Well, methane, we're born now, we're going to eat these things, and then we'll die off, right? And that happens all over the planet in many different niches. Now, I'll be quiet now, because there's so much more.
So data is great. Methods of collecting data equally as important as well. All right, next question.
This question is for anyone. I see a correlation between ghosts and aliens. And so sometimes I see, you can't tell the difference. Sometimes ghosts do the same thing aliens do. And so if a ghost is our spirits when we all die, can aliens see our spirits when they come here? And are we maybe perhaps aliens when we return into spirits? So that's my question. Is what would be the relationships between the ghosts and the aliens? And can they see us as we are now and as we are when we're spirits?
We have a long-standing theory that time is linear. It goes from here and it goes in a straight line over there. What we're starting to see is that time may not be linear, it may be circular, kind of like a record player. And every now and then it skips. When you talk about the soul, and you're talking about electromagnetic energy, energy cannot be destroyed. Okay, it can change state, but it can't be destroyed. So what we see, like up in Window Rock area, that's where Navajos were encamped before they were forced marched almost 300 miles in basically what amounted to a death march. And a lot of people were murdered and killed. A lot of women and young girls were raped and killed. And when your energy leaves you, it has to go somewhere. Does it just go into the air? Sometimes it attaches to physical objects. And it can attach to rocks, it can attach to objects. And those objects can contain some of that energy. And so we see over and over that these things, a lot of times they're repeatable. It's almost like watching a video going over and over and over every now and then. And Stan's had a lot of experience. He went to Canyon de Chelly and up Canyon del Muerto at a place up there called Massacre Cave, where Navajos were killed. He's up there just visiting in the late evening, and he heard gunfire, and he heard screaming, just lots of it. And he he has this ability to just feel these things and cause them to manifest. And he was hearing the firing of muskets down there during the Massacre Cave incident. And we go on these haunting investigations, and he actually gets touched by ghosts. We have ghosts show up at these buildings. A lot of the housekeeping staff won't work at night in those buildings over there because there's so many ghosts that are seen. So they only want to work during the day, and then they're gone. So, and what I was going to say earlier, one of the things that the government likes to do is they like to cause panic. You know, we were told that the war would end all wars, right? World War I. We were told that the Nazis were going to enslave the world. And we really looked at them and we said, oh, they're just horrible. Look at them. They killed all these people. They were using something called eugenics. Our modern 4-H club is built on eugenics. This idea that you can breed something perfect. And they were trying to breed a race of Germans that was perfect. Guess where they got it from? Back in the 1930s, the United States was into eugenics. And the German government looked at it and they said, wow, what a good idea. Let's take it one more step. So we started that, you know, but we won't admit it. So the government likes to panic us, you know, weapons of mass destruction. Oh, Iraq has those. Let's go over and wipe them out. We didn't find any. Communism, right? Back in the 50s. Those commies are going to come and get us, and they're going to, you know, take your children. So we have a lot of this going on, but what happens when you panic? You want to do something about it. You're willing to reach in your wallet and say, here's some money. And who benefits? You have to look at that. Now, here's the other thing, global warming. In physics, they say that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's like a big pendulum that swings back and forth very slowly. What we're seeing is a pendulum over on this side, but it's going to swing back the other way. Then they're going to be complaining about global winter, the ice age, and they're going to say we need money.
That's it. That's what it was.
So, you know, it just keeps going. I think it's just a way to keep us occupied. So, you know, we see a lot of that, and we just say, you know, our planet is self-thriving. And if it needs to wipe us out, it'll probably do that too. So we just need to be good stewards.
Over the years of John and I doing these investigations of these things called paranormal, one commonality we've seen was the relationship to other dimensions and other planes of existence. And so with the question as far as the extraterrestrial or alien and the spirit world or ghosts, you know, all of these things are intertwined. And sometimes in our physical world, just like my experience with the coins of hoarding, these things will happen. These things will come from some other space, some other time maybe, into our physical world. We experience these things and then they're back over. And the same for me is the things like the Bigfoot. You know, John and I at times in our patrols and stuff have lived in the woods, and there are signs of everything that lives out there, the bear and the mountain lions, everything. And you can see where these things have dens and bed down, and where their routes to go get water and food and hunt. You can see all of that, but you don't see that with the Bigfoot. Yes, we go into the investigation and we see the evidence of the tracks and at times things like hair and stuff, but they are not, from what we can tell, out there living in the woods like a bear. We don't see evidence of that. And again, that leads to the idea that these are dimensional beings that are either being placed here or they have the ability on their own to be able to cross over into our physical world for whatever reason, and they're seen here and then they're crossed back over. But I think if you get to looking at that and you start looking at the data from the Bigfoot cases or these haunting or UFO cases, you'll see there's correlations with those kind of things, and it's all intertwined.
This has been an amazing panel. We want to thank all the participants. We'd like to go on. We could go on for more days. Unfortunately, we have a limited time in the facility and we're going to have to wrap it up. So Daniel, you want to close everything for us?
Sure, I know that there were a few more questions. Let's see if we can keep that going after we're clearing the building. It has been pretty fascinating. We'll get one more question from the audience here. Oh, go ahead. We'll start with you.
I had a real quick question just to close, and unless you've been living under a rock for the last 20 years, we're moving towards a technocratic dictatorship of some sort, some kind of global society that's working towards mass surveillance and things of that sort. So what do you think, mostly directed at Mike, but everybody else wants to chime in, what are your thoughts about where are we really going? What's the point of the disclosures now at this time? That's my ultimate question, because we already know all these other details.
Where are we going in terms of the autocratic, technocratic society?
I don't know where we're going, but I want to know what you think.
Okay. There's a war going on right now in front of our faces. And it's inside the government, it's inside the military. I have a friend who used to be very connected in government. He used to guard 2 presidents of the United States. He was basically about 9 months ago invited to come to a military base and meet with a guy he knew from his time in the Secret Service, where he was browbeaten for 5 days about why he believed a certain person was the commander-in-chief and not the person that they're telling us is the commander-in-chief. That told me that there is a battle going on behind the scenes. And I don't know how it's going to come out. I don't know who's going to win. The UFO thing is part of the narrative. The alien thing is part of the narrative. But there is a battle taking place. And it hasn't been decided yet who's going to win. But I have a feeling it's going to be really soon. Like in the next 6 months, we should have a clear victory. So I can't tell you what I think. I just know that there is a battle. There's a battle in the military, there's a battle in government. So you're seeing punch and counter-punch, right? You know, the punch was the hearings. That was a big, somebody threw a punch. The counter-punch as well, your star witness is a mean drunk whose wife was afraid of him, and he should have lost his security clearance, right? So watch it in that context. And remember one other thing. If they try to convince you that World War III is happening, do not pay attention to what you see on your screens, your phones or your TV screens. Pay attention to what's going on around you. If World War III is not happening in your backyard, you got to question what you see on TV, because they're so good now with green screens and they're so good with propaganda that they can make you believe almost anything. So be very cautious of what you hear, because again, I say let's step back and let these guys beat the crap out of each other and see what happens, right? I do have fears about the censorship going on. You know, the internet is an amazing instrument. I think it was Noah was saying, you don't realize technologically how different things are just the last 20 years. I mean, you can be at 37,000 feet and you can be video chatting live with somebody in Australia. That's like 7,000 miles away. That's an amazing world to live in, but that can also be misused. So, again, I just think, be very skeptical of anything you see, and let's wait and see who wins this Boxing match. That's how I feel about it.
If you haven't seen it, go watch the movie Wag the Dog. It'll give you a good inkling. And thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.